Hi, welcome back to CS170 full section. We're looking at Excel tables and pivot tables this week. So I think I'm going to cut one video for Excel tables to start off with, and then we're going to do a pivot table in the next lecture. Okay, so let me just punch in some values here. So instead of having you just like take in like a sheet with whatever values, you might want to just play around and follow along by putting in your own values here. So I know it's a little bit misleading, but I kind of cleaned it up anyway. They refer to a vegetable sheet, and then they're kind of showing you some stuff from an airline. So I'm just going to start off fresh with this. So let me do something like this. I'm gonna say like flight number, and let's see. And what else do we have? Airport. Let's see here. Let me see. Arrival. Flight. Let's see. And then total flights. So not too many, I guess, but enough that we can kind of come up with some sort of table. We're not going to go crazy here. We're just going to do whatever to come up with some numbers here. So let's see, 1,000. See here, drag this down. That looks like a decent number here. I did it quickly without saying anything, but let me just comment here. So if you didn't see what I did here, I just wanted to create some numbers, unique numbers. So I took like these first two here, the bottom right where this little darkened corner is. I dragged that down, and then that made all of this sequential numbers here. Okay. In this case, we don't want it to be moving around. Let's just do everything for 2022. So again, you didn't see what I did there. So what I did was a copy paste. So here I did on my keyboard a Control C. I'm trying to think on a MacBook. What is a MacBook? It's like a control. I don't think the MacBook has a control, right? It has like all something, but whatever that is, and then C for copy, and then V for paste, right? Just so I can maybe do it visually, here's what I'll do. So here you can see copy, right? So I copied it, and then I went down to here, and then I did a right mouse, and then I pasted it. And there's no formulas or anything, so it's just a straight copy and paste. And the MacBook would work exactly the same way. The MacBook, for you to do a right mouse, I believe you have to hit 2 fingers to pop up the same thing as on the PC. You do a right mouse button. Okay. I don't know. Let's pick a random day. So 11, 3. And then let's do United. Copy down a few Uniteds. Let's do AA. WR, yes. What else is there? And these down. Six, three, and just gonna make this easier. I'm just gonna copy this whole chunk over to departing. And I'll just extend this a little bit. All right. All right, so we have some values here. So it doesn't take that long. I guess it took me a couple minutes to whip that together. So you might play around, you might do a couple of different things here. It's basically copy and pasting and doing some filling and whatnot. So let's go back to here. So what are we trying to do here? So we're trying to do some tables here. So tables to me is kind of just like a step up from like doing your data. So you remember if I was here and I went to data, you can do like filter, right? And then filter, you can kind of do all kinds of stuff off of the top here and whatnot. And I don't know if you remember, we did subtotals off of that too. But let's see what happens when we do it as a table. But the concept is pretty similar. So you can see here, you have the insert tab and then you have the table. So we have an insert and we have a table. So here, table. Okay. And you can see it did it automatically. And you can see I only selected one value, right? Or one cell, right? You see this point here, select one cell. Kind of stupid, but yeah. If you select multiple cells, evidently it causes problems. So just select the one cell and then do what I just did here instead to insert the table. And you can see what it did here, okay? And the other thing that we can do is we can play around with the header here a bit. So see here, data. Right here. Okay. All right. So there's a couple of things here. Maybe you don't like this blue off and on type of thing. So you can go to here. You can go to here. You can go to here. So if you guys are doing this on your desktop versions of Excel, that should be fine. I believe you're not going to be able to do this if you use the web-based version. So I think I said this earlier, when you do the Excel stuff, just download it locally. onto your computer. As part of a Rutgers students, you get the site license, so there's no problem with you doing that. So I would suggest you do that, because I think with some of these, and maybe even on the charts, like you don't get these style options. You can just create it, and then that's it. You can see over here, you can see like the header row, and then you can see the bandit rows here, right? Makes it just easier to line things up a little bit when you put bandit. So that's why they do that. So if I unclick it, it looks like that. It's a little bit hard when you have a whole bunch of data, so you don't see it. And then total row, this is kind of one of those things where, sort of like, you remember we did the subtotals off of like the data filter. But here you see, well, arrival flights. What is a good number for that? I don't know. Let's just do the sum. All right, we'll just do the sum. That's fine. And we'll do, and we'll just do sum for all of these. Okay. Like I said, the reason why I did this lecture before I did the pivot tables, because I kind of feel this builds on what you got from the data filter. It's a similar type of thing, but it's just kind of like a little bit more fancy or more robust on top of it, right? Now you can see that 70, 14, 73, and 12. Well, so what happens if I were to filter this one out? So let's, and you can see what happened here: 67, 13, 70, and 11, right? Let's take out another row. Let's take out this one here. Actually, this one's a better one. Let me take out this one. And I'm going to hide this one. And you can see what happened here: 60, 11, 63, and 9, right? So this is important. Try to remember this. This is the same thing with the filter, like the data filter, where we were talking about the difference between doing just a regular sum and then doing the subtotal, right? That the sum that you get out from there. And the difference is that if I just do the sum, it'll just look at everything in that column. Doesn't matter whether you hit it or not. But here, when I do the hiding of these rows, whatever you see visually, that's what it's gonna, in this case, sum all the values. So you filtering will adjust these values, which kind of makes sense, because otherwise you're looking at numbers and then they don't match up to the bottom here. Okay, so keep that in mind. You should understand this is one of those things where you'll be asked to explain what's the difference between doing the sum and then doing the subtotal sum, and so that's the difference. Okay, just like probably a very common thing you're gonna make sure you need to know is the absolute and relative cell reference. Okay, so here, all right. So this is just to take the table, to undo the table, I guess. Don't really do that very often, I guess, but I guess if you're gonna do that, so let me see, where am I here? Data. Oops, I hit the wrong thing there. Let me see here. Oh, here we go. Convert to a range. Okay, so I'm here. I'm going to take this out and then convert it back to a range. And then you can see what happened here, right? You see you lost all the stuff that you had up here when you had the table. The band still stayed here, but everything else is gone from what you had before. Okay, but notice here, you still see this subtotal here. This is exactly what you would have done if you were doing this as a data. So you remember the data here, you did the filters, and then you put the subtotals here. That's what you get now if you back out that table. Okay. Let me put the table back in. Let's see if I can do that. Good. Okay. So I got the table back in here. I got these back here. This is not quite where I had it before. So let's see if I put a total row like that, see what happened. So it got kind of a little bit messed up here, right? I just have to delete this sucker here. And let's see if this works now. Some like that. Yeah, that looks right. Okay. So let me come over to here and I'm going to say the total flights is the arrival flights. And look at this when I clicked on arrival flights. It's basically referring to basically like this named range of arrival flights, right? And then I'm going to do a plus and let's do the departing flights here, which is that. And look at what it did, right? It actually applied the whole thing all the way down, right? So that's one of the things you get with the table here. Okay, so I'm going to pause for a second, let you kind of just digest that a little bit. Okay, so what did I do? So I have a table. I created this column called total flights. And then I said, I'm going to make the total flights, the arrival flights plus the departing flights. So I took this plus this, right? But when I built up the formula, it didn't really look at it as like G2 plus I2. It looked at the whole column, right? In this case, the arrival flights and then the departing flights. And then it knew to apply that to the whole column for total flights, right? So you can see if I click on any of these, I go all the way down, you see it doesn't change at all, right? So you're not really working on a cell by cell basis, but you're working on a total column basis. Okay, so I hope that makes sense to you. That's another one of the things that you get when you work with this as a table. Okay, so if I knew ahead of time that I'm going to create like a number of things that are kind of formulas off of each other within the table, you only have to work with one of those cells, let's say, and it'll know to apply it to the whole column. Okay, so that's another thing you should know about tables. Okay, so where am I here? We did the convert to range. We did the total row that I just put out there. And, oh, okay. So the last bit here is the data validation tool. Okay. So let's go back here to data. And where are we at? Here's the data validation tool. Oops. And okay. So what do we have here for data validation? Okay, so let me see here. Why am I stuck here? Here we go. All right. What do we want to validate? Let's validate on arrival flights. And what do we want to do on that? I guess we want to have a whole number. It wouldn't really make sense to have 2.5 flights. It wouldn't make sense, I guess, to have like negative arrival flights. Depends on the situation. Maybe you do, right? Maybe you're trying to get all the flights out of the airport, but then I guess you would call them departing flights, right? Well, let's just say this is a whole number, between 0 and I don't know what the capacity of flights may be. Maybe let's say 30, something like that. Okay, and then I'm going to take that down to here. Oops, actually, that's not what I want to do. So let me back that out. let's look at what this data validation here. Would have liked to have seen this for the whole thing like this. I did that fill again. That's not what I want. I want to do this and then select it and then apply the data validation to the whole thing. Now you see what it says here? It says the selection contains some cells without data validations. Do you want to extend the validation to all these cells? Which is yes, right? I want to have the same checks to all of the arrival flights. Okay, and then you can see I'm doing the same thing, whole number, and the data is between 0 and 30. So let's do that. All right, so now what happens if I type in 200? Right, and you can see what happens. It just basically pops that up. Okay, so this is something where once you've defined it, when you try to put in new data that doesn't apply to it, it'll pop up with that type of error message. Okay, so that's what this data validation does. And you can also add more to it in terms of like popping up what type of error message. And when you do the input, like what type of input message you might want to put in, right? So the only thing I put in was the check between 0 and 30 for the arrival flight. But what else can we do here? You know, if I was doing like some sort of string, then you can do like a text length or something like that. So that's kind of like putting it in, you know, kind of limiting certain types of entries going in. You know, that's one way that's kind of built into Excel. If you do something like this, you remember we had like some conditional stuff, right? We have the conditional formatting. We can also have like some checks here, right? So if it's true, pop up error or something like that, right? So you can do stuff like that. So like, remember we had the equal if, right? So if, you know, let's say the arrival flight, I put in 200, right? Just like I did here. So then this cell, you can make this cell pop up anything. You can make the cell pop up like a red or whatever. So you don't actually have to use what Excel is giving you here with this data validation. You could do your own little thing here with the equals if, right? And then you can say whatever. You can say error or whatnot. You can make it red with the conditional formatting. So that's another way for you to generate some sort of like data validation by popping up like something in this L column, let's say. Okay, so you don't have to do it the way I just did it. This is just something that's built into Excel to do data validation. Okay, so you can try this. And I think maybe for this week, I'm going to give you one small extra credit, which is to basically just do this table here. And you can do one or both. You can do having your conditional check here using the data validation. And you can do like a equals if here, right? To say whatever. If it's less than 0 and greater than 30, let's say error. Otherwise, say good or something like that. So that can give you some practice on that. So for your extra credit, you can do that. I only pick 0 and 30. You can put in whatever. You can put in 0 to 20, 0 to 10, whatever you think is good for the numbers that you put in. Okay. But hopefully you just followed the example that I just did here, and you can try this yourself, and I'll put that as your extra credit. Okay. So try to build up a table like what I just did here. You can see I just whipped up some numbers really quick. Do that. Set up the table to do like some checking on here with this data validation, but also try to do like the if that I just mentioned here. And if it's like, let's say for the sake of argument, greater than 20, say error here. Okay. So I'm going to wrap this up and I'm going to cut another lecture for pivot table soon. Okay, so a pivot table is just like another layer to build on top of this, right? Just like I feel like this table is a layer on top of like the data filter that I showed you earlier. Okay, all right, so enjoy, and I will come back with the pivot table lecture shortly. Thank you.